Peace.
Hi, hello to the garden. Hello, hello, hello. This computer, I'm kind of new, so I'm just kind of swinging it. Peace to the garden. Peace to the garden. Hey, my aunt. Hey, Maricela. How are you guys doing?
Peace,
Good,
Hanifa, and
good.
peace, Maricela. We're doing well. I'm doing well today. How are you doing, Hanifa?
I'm okay. I got to turn my phone down. It's echoing. I'm okay. I'm here. I'm excited to have this conversation. Can you guys hear me well?
Yeah, I can
Yes.
hear
Okay.
you.
I'm excited to have this conversation. How are you
Yeah,
guys feeling?
yeah, I'm excited to have it too. I think that it's going to be one of those conversations that it's going to get real, and we're going to have to kind of self-evaluate some of the things that we have developed from generation to generation. So I'm ready to get into it.
What about you, Maricela?
Agreed. I agree. I think that it'll be interesting to see what things have impacted us the most and how we've been able to kind of move forward and create new beginnings, so to speak.
Yeah, and I'm actually excited to get the audience engaged. So, if you guys are just joining us, welcome to Conversation with Queens.
Yes,
We are here
welcome,
every
welcome.
Tuesdays on Conversations with Kings platform at 9 p.m. We start. We are usually here from 9 to 11. If we run over a little bit, we don't really complain about it. I mean, the conversation is sweet, sweet, right? So today we are going to be discussing things that we have inherited from generation to generation. We're not only going to be focusing on the negative, although we're going to discuss those and probably unpack some of them, but we're also going to be focusing on the positive as well, because we know oftentimes in these conversations, we hear a lot about generational curses, right? A lot.
Yeah.
And it holds a certain negative, it holds a negative tone to it. And so when we had the conversation, we were like, I don't know if it was my aunt or Maricela, one of you guys, it wasn't me, um, injected the idea of perhaps focusing on some of those positive things that we may have inherited as well. And this is still a part of our series, The Gender War. And it's just building on the conversations that we've been having around masculine femininity and toxic femininity and toxic masculinity. So today we are focused solely on generational things that we have inherited, that we have either been able to break or build on. So you ladies ready to get started?
Yes,
We
let's get into
discussed
it.
each one of us, just kind of touching on ones that we may have inherited and that you're willing to share, actually, because I do know that there are some things that people may not be willing to share on a public platform, but still they're able to speak to the fact that they broke it over their own life, as far as generational familial ties are concerned. But I'm gonna go ahead and my aunt Maricela, any one of you guys that I'm not starting. I'm just letting y'all know. I did the intro, okay? Whenever you guys, any one of you guys could start at any time. Please feel free.
So, Maricela, you want to take it?
Yeah. So I guess my first question would be for all of us, what is the most toxic and the most positive generational trait that you feel has been passed down onto to yourselves? Um, for me, the most toxic is also the most positive, and it's having that sense of um, motherhood and learning how to be a good mate. Because for me, it's been learning how to be selfless, but also neglecting when it's time to be selfish. And I say that because I'm raising a daughter, and I want her to know, like, when you can say no. For me, it's really hard to say no. I struggle with telling people no, that's not what I want, that's not what I'm here for. um, so that's my first question. What is one, or you can share as many as you'd like, positive and one toxic trait that you guys have kind of seen passed down?
Well,
Okay. Oh,
Maya,
go
before
ahead.
you get started, I just want to say to the chat, hey, over the top. So if you guys are in here and you have not hit the like button, please do so at this time. Okay. Likes are free. All right. Go ahead and hit the button. Be generous. Be nice to us. Okay. And if you haven't subscribed as yet and you're just tuning in, please make sure you hit the subscribe button. Share the conversation, share the link with your friends, your family members, and have them to tune in as well. I apologize for interrupting you. I just wanted to throw that in there because if King was here, he would have
Turn the
been
lights up.
the lights up. Go ahead, my aunt.
Okay, so Maricela, so toxic trait, so the kind of the bad and the good. So I'll start with the bad and then I'll go into the good. So one toxic trait, and there's many, but one that kind of hits close to home for me is the toxic foods. So I think that toxic foods that's being passed down from generation to generation, and then we normalize those foods, or we normalize the illnesses that we get from ingesting those toxic foods. So we normalize high blood pressure, which is a disease. Most people don't think of it as a disease, but it is a disease. We normalize uh certain let's see, certain things like heart disease, or congestive heart failure, and all of these things in our community. We kind of normalize it, and we say, oh well, my grandma had that, or my auntie had that. And so it's very important that we understand, and I'll give you a short story about how I learned how to get kind of get control over my eating habits, because I did see those eating habits being transferred from generation to generation. And one thing we have to understand, that at one point it was needed. It was a survival mechanism.
Yes.
And so something that I think about that came good out of that is that we could take literally anything and we could make it good. We could take those scraps and we could make something good out of that. But it was for survival. We needed to survive, we needed to eat. But now we're using those same techniques that we learned, and we're still ingesting, but then it's worse. Um, it's getting worse over the years. So there are kids who are obese at a very young age. And so one thing that I found, and so food is a connection to your emotions. So I'm from Louisiana, from the South. We eat spicy food. That's kind of a thing for us, eating spicy food. So no one questions the amount of spicy foods that we eat. So I remember in high school, that was a thing for me. I'm gonna go get my spicy chips, eat my spicy foods, all of that. Like that was something I did. I would binge on spicy foods, and that was normal for us living in the South. And so when I began on my healing journey, and listening to Dr. Africa and Dr. Sabi and things like that, I started connecting the dots, that my eating spicy foods was connected to anger. And so the more that I went down that healing journey, I started realizing I'm not even craving spicy foods anymore. I eat it here and there, and there's some spicy like cayenne pepper. That's a really good spice, but we're not eating cayenne pepper or these peppers. We're eating hot sauce. We're like pouring the hot sauce, which has all that sodium, and we are ingesting that. And then and that's just an example of what's being passed down. Just like ingesting a lot of sweets, that's tied to being in an emotional state, being depressed. And so that's something that we see and we normalize. We normalize filling the plate up and telling our kids, eat all your food, even if they're even if they're full. We're telling them, eat everything that's on your plate. And most of the things that are on our plate is not even good for us. So I will say that the good thing is that we can, I see that even with my daughter. She's 9 and she does a lot of cooking, and she can take something, but we're vegan, so she can take something and she can create it into like it's six of us in the house, so she can create it into something amazing. And that's something that, you know, our grandmothers did. They might have had a lot of children, but and they didn't have a lot of money, and they would create something amazing out of that. They were able to feed not only their family, sometimes they're feeding the people in the neighborhood. So I think that's something that is good, where people who can take something, um, that can take something small or take something and make it into something amazing. And so I definitely think that's something that we can use, but we have to identify those toxic habits, and we have to identify that a lot of us are killing ourselves with the food. So, you know, I'll stop there and see what Hanifa has to say.
Well, that was good because when I was trying to write down my own list, um, diet did come to mind, of course. And
Mhm.
Caribbean people, we eat a lot of rice and starchy foods, right? So that was one of my lists, and everything that you just said was spot on. I had a friend that actually we had a conversation, and she was telling me that her mom, she has her relationship with food right now is because her mom used to force her to sit at the table until she was finished, right? And so like we're out eating, and it's like, okay, we could go, and she feels that she has to clean her plate even though she's already full, which
Mhm.
she also said added to her weight problems as well, right? So when you just mentioned that, but for me personally, one of the big ones, I have a couple of them, but one of the big ones for me that I would say that, and it's probably out of, okay, so I'm the youngest of five girls. Okay, my mom had all girls, and I'm the youngest. And I want to say, out of all of us, I'm probably the only one who break this particular generational thing, and that's spanking
Mm.
slash corporal punishment slash whoopings, whatever y'all want to call them.
That's
I
a good one.
Yeah, I decided before I even had children that I wasn't going to. But a lot of it had to do with my educational background, which is in child development, and psychology. So through education, I started to say, you know what, there are alternatives. And what I found is that a lot of us, we haven't even attempted to try the alternatives as yet. We just like, no, that's not gonna work. Like, for example, timeout. Black folks will say that's a white person thing, right? So we're not willing to try anything else but the belt. Or, I've heard people said they were beaten with they had to go get their own switch, for example. I never got that far, but my mom had a belt. um so for me, I made a conscious decision not to beat my children, right? And let me tell you guys something, it was a straight detox, and it still is. Okay, one of the last things to go when you decide not to hit your child is yelling, because they oftentimes go hand in hand.
Mhm.
So most parents don't beat in silence, right? Most parents are whooping their children without nothing. It's usually the lash is the comma, right? You don't hear, right? So
That
it
is so
goes hand in
true.
hand, right, with the yelling. And so for me, what I found with myself, I decided not to, and I still don't. My son is 9, and I have a 2-year-old now, right? Turning 3. And what I found is it's a lot more talking that has to be
Mhm.
done. Whew, exhausting sometimes, right? But it's a lot more talking that has to be done. And I'm still working on my yelling. I am, because when I feel like I can't get the outcome that I want, I resort to what I know. Because what
Yeah.
we're talking about today
Yeah.
is not as simple as waking up one day and deciding you're not going to do this particular thing anymore, and you're just going to break this generational. No, it's work, right? Because these things are embedded in us,
Mhm.
not just in our minds but in our bodies as well. It's there in our body. The body holds memory as well. Like the body's like
Yes.
one big brain, right? And
Mhm.
so it's a process. It was a process. I still stand on it. I don't, I don't have to hit my 9-year-old. I don't beat them at all. But that's a conscious decision I made before having children, right? That I didn't want to do that because I felt like in my studies and so forth, a lot of the approach to how we discipline children as Black people, a lot of it is rooted in the plantation mentality, right? And so I am going to attempt to save my child by beating them before you have to beat them. That's the mindset, right? And so for most parents too, I realize that it's just the easy way. It's just, but in the long run, what is the long-term effect of that, right? What impact does it have on your relationship with your child, right? Where does that anger go when you beat a child and they can't hit you back? Where does that go? Where does that anger go, right? We have to think about all these things because sometimes we don't even consider that it's a problem until you really start paying attention, because a lot of us do have misdirected anger. That's just the reality. So that's my big one, to be honest. I have others, but that's the main one that I would say. And by the way, it's not just a change in the family dynamic, like the passing down. It's a cultural shift for me. It is a cultural shift for me to where I can go to places and perhaps my son may talk a certain way, maybe, and somebody just culturally will be like, you need to pop him or something like that. Someone is going to direct me to put my hands on my child. So it's not just the family that I'm dealing with in breaking this particular thing, it's the culture. Right? And most of us, who wants to go up against their culture, right?
I agree with you because it's the same thing in my culture. It's the same thing. My daughter is very assertive, and she'll let me know. She'll let anybody know, like, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. And everybody sees it as like, who does she think she is? It's because you don't spank her, you don't do this, you don't tell her, you don't yell at her. And I struggle with the yelling myself. I'm a lot better at it, I feel, but I know I could work on it. But I think it's just for myself, for my Latino culture, it's the same thing. It's, we think that if we can catch it or nip it in the butt, so to speak, then they'll do better in life. But I know so many people that because of that anger as a child that they held on to, it's really damaged them as an adult, whether it's they're too aggressive or they're too afraid to speak up for themselves. Do you guys think that's a generational curse then? I think Hanifa, you kind of touched on that.
I mean, for me, I'm very careful with the word curse. I just think it's just generational patterns. I would just say patterns, right? It definitely is. Is it a healthy one? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And we can have this conversation all day because I'm outnumbered in this. Trust me, I know. I am in the minority. Trust me, I've been in many conversations, right, with people about this. But I stand my ground on that. I will stand against my whole culture for it, right? Because I truly believe that we need to learn alternative ways to discipline our children. You know what I mean? And this has nothing to do with it being a white thing. Our children deserve as much gentleness, right, as any other children in this world, as much patience, right, as much love, all of that. So I picked that one because I'm just like, I know this is a big one and it's a cultural thing. And I wanted to say to Maricela and anyone that's listening, if you decide to stop beating your child tomorrow, I just need you to know that if your child trip and fall in the grocery store, it's because you're not beating them. If your child gets bad grades in school, it's because you're not beating them. If your child just can't keep still in the living room, it's because you're not beating them. They are going to point at every behavior your child get and tell you it is because you're not beating them. I just want to put that out there. Yeah.
Agreed.
So that's mine.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off of both of y'all, and that's something that, you know, I have 4 kids. I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and so my husband is not 100% with the not you know, that he's not 100% with that, and we have debates about it. And but we do a lot of time, you know, time out, or you know, you can't do certain things instead of that, because I do feel just like you, Hanifa. I feel like it does come from that kind of that plantation kind of mindset. And I struggle with yelling, because that's what I heard a lot of yelling, and so I struggle. That's one thing that I definitely struggle with, and I try to work on. But I was just telling my husband today, I was just like, a lot of time, nobody, when somebody spanks a child, they're not saying, I'm happy, I'm spanking you. They're usually angry, they're usually frustrated or something, and so they're spanking them, and they're kind of putting their anger. A lot of times when I got spankings, it I felt like there was anger coming out of that. And even to your point, Hanifa, about I even got told one time, I remember being at school, I was in elementary school, and there was a conversation between my mother, and she said, well, I have to be harder on you. The principal was white, and there was an issue that happened, and she said, I have to be harder on you. I have to show them that I'm harder on you, so that they won't be hard on you. So that's something that is definitely in our culture. I have to be harder on you. I have to spank you. I have to beat you, so that others are not. And when you really think about that, that's that mindset that is coming from prior generations, because they felt like they had to do that. They even had to say certain things to us, so that, you know, that whole plantation mindset. I'm going to talk down on you so that maybe you won't get sold. You know, and so it's a survival. We're talking about a lot of things that we're talking about are survival techniques that we don't need anymore. So we have to start relearning and start, you know, actually healing our our bloodlines and healing from this generational trauma.
I like how you said, Maya, we start talking down. I feel like sometimes also another thing that is a trait is we always compare either ourselves or our children with, oh, you're going to be just like your uncle whoever, or you're going to be just
Hmm.
like your tia this, because you are acting like this and that, and already like placing characterisms that might not necessarily be theirs, but because we do that, and we tend to have that trait. I know in my culture we have that, to tend to have that trait. For example, and I'm going to call myself out on this, but every second girl that's born in the family is a single mom. I'm the second girl born in the family, and I so happen to be a single mom. So it's weird. And I remember being told growing up, like, oh, you act like this, or oh, you behave like this. And it wasn't just necessarily by my parents, but by other people. And so now I'm thinking, because of Linsky's question, do we think that has a psychological effect on us growing up, and who we become as adults?
I'm glad I was just gonna ask the behind the scenes crew to bring Lensky back up. But yes, I act to Lensky's question, yes. Because think about it. I'm gonna just use a woman for example, right? The men who we complain about, who lack emotional intelligence, right? And who cannot express themselves. When you really sit and talk to some of them, they had no voice,
Mm.
right? In their homes. That's just the reality. So when we talk about long-term effects, that's what we're talking about, right? The men, we are raising the men that we are complaining about, right? And I'm talking about mothers here. Let me just be clear. I'm talking about mothers here, right?
Hmm.
Not having the space to emote, right? To emote, to self-express, right? What type of adult do you think you are creating by having them suppress their self-expression, their emotion, right? Their anger even. Their anger even. We get very uncomfortable with anger, right? And you said something about, like, if someone gets, I think it was my aunt that was just speaking, that said something about if someone gets angry. I thought about this today as to how so many of us, when we get angry, the only release we know is violence. For a
Yeah.
lot of us, the only release of that anger that we know is violence. And there are so many other ways to release that. But do we learn that? No. Oftentimes the answer is no. Why? Because what my aunt spoke about, for I'm still speaking to Lenski's question, when parents beat, like parents be like, well, my mom used to say, don't beat the children when you're angry. And that's almost impossible. Because then why are you beating them? Why are you beating them then? You are actually frustrated and angry when you spank a child. So yes, the long-term psychological effects, I mean, we could go on and on tonight about what they are, you know, but I'm just mentioning about one, the lack of emotional intelligence, right? The ability to express without anger, right? To emote something else other than anger, right? The ability to speak on how you actually feel, vulnerability, those things, right? That's just a couple of them. So yes, there are long-term effects. We are raising children who will become adults.
Right.
Okay. And so it's very important for me with my sons, and it's tricky. It's very tricky. But I allow a lot of space for, especially my 9-year-old, to express himself. I don't always agree with what he says, but it is what it is. You know, one of the last things I actually, because I want us to open up the stream. The sex talk was on my list.
Right. We need to talk about that.
The sex talk was on my list of what's passed down from generation to generation that we need to break, right? Not having the sex talk with your children. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys an example. You guys know I was out of tongue, right? So my son decides to get up and give a speech to his aunt whose birthday was. And in the speech he made, like, he's into making like knock jokes and so forth, right? So the question was the joke was something along the lines of, what do you call a dancing a chicken or something like that at KFC? And there was like, what? And I think he said something like a chicken stripper, a stripper, right? Some things go wait to the car, some things go wait to the car. So we got in the car. I asked him, I said, do you even know what a stripper is? And his response was, of course I do. So, I'm all ears, like, what your daddy done did, or what you saw on YouTube, right? And come to find out, you know what he said? He said, remember the movie Independence Day? His girlfriend, she was a stripper. And then in the next one, she actually became a nurse or a doctor. I could not for the life of me remember that Vivica Fox.
Wow. Yeah, she was.
My aunt, I swear, I had to sit and think like, oh my gosh, he's right. And he was like, yeah, I know about strippers from the Independence Day. I say all that to say, the sex talk that we try to put on hold, our children are constantly being fed messages.
Yeah.
Constantly. You're either going to leave them to figure it out on their own, which looks crazy, or they are going to get their information from peers, right? Now, how early? It depends on you. You know your child. Some children are more mature than others, so you can't just go by age. You kind of have to feel it out and know if your child is ready or not, right? But the delay of the sex talk is something we have to break. We have to break that. We have to start talking to our children really early, because if they can watch certain movies with certain like messages in there that you don't even realize that they're picking up on. I totally forgot Vivica Fox was a stripper in that movie. I swear I did.
But the commercials have gotten worse.
Right, but he didn't. So my thing is, are you going to continue to act oblivious and pretend that this is not happening? That you could be walking down the street and it could be a billboard sign and sex is everywhere around them, and actually figure out how to engage with them? You can use videos. You could take them to a class. There are ways if you're not that comfortable, because let's be honest, some of us also aren't, because we may have like sexual abuse in our background.
Right.
And it could be like at a young age. And so it's like, no, I don't want to open her or him up to that as yet. because it's triggering for us. But there are other ways to get the information to our children. So I just kind of wanted to inject the sex talk piece because that's a big one. Because I realize a lot of homes, they're just not having the conversation. And these children are out here figuring it out on their own. And
right. TikTok is a real thing, right?
Yeah. So
I mean, and that kind of makes me think, yeah, it makes me think of the music that we've been listening to since forever. I mean, even when we were young, it's funny, I was in spin earlier today, and there was a song that the spin instructor put on as we were cooling down, and it was the Keith Sweat's, what was that Keith Sweat song? Right in a Wrong Way. And it was talking and the lyrics on that song, it was saying, I know you're young, but I think you're ready.
Oh boy.
And
no. Oh my gosh.
Now I'm gonna have to go look it up.
And I'm listening to the words, and I've heard this song before, but I'm listening to the words and I'm like, what is he saying? And and so it kind of goes to show you that, and that's things, because these songs that like R. Kelly, Keith Sweat, all of them were putting out, they were for women. It wasn't for men, it was for women. And so we have to start taking ownership for that perpetuation of these toxic things, because music, it reflects what's happening in our communities.
I have a little pushback on that though.
Okay.
I disagree, because I listen to all kinds of music, and I mean, my daughter hears it. Also, I have an uncle of mine who listens to some of the not most appropriate music. He has 3 daughters, and his youngest daughter can rap to any Jay-Z, Eminem song you play, Lizzo, whatever. She's singing that song. But both of the oldest are in college. They're great kids. They've only had one boyfriend. So is it more so the music, or is it the lack of communication, like Hanifa was mentioning? Is it the lack of letting them know, like, okay, yes, it says this in this song, but doesn't mean you have to do it, doesn't mean you have to follow through with that.
So I think, because if we say that certain things like images have an effect on our subconscious, like images have an effect, so does music. So music has an effect on our subconscious because of the frequencies and what they put with them and the vibrations they put with them. So when you put those frequencies and those vibrations, because I mean, there's a lot of music that is playing when I'm in spin, and I'll be like, oh yeah, and then I'm like, what are they saying? What are they saying? And so I don't necessarily listen to that music, but there are people who are constantly listening to that music, so things get normalized. So and then we have to understand every generation has become more and more sexualized. And so it is still feeding into our subconscious. So that is an issue, because I mean, we don't talk about all the time. I remember going to middle school, and I went from a Christian school to a public school in middle school, and I was still like 11 years old, maybe 11, 12 years old. And on my first day of school, somebody said, are you a virgin? And I thought that was the weirdest question in the world. And then I started learning that there were girls who were like 10, 11, 12 years old who lost their virginity. And so, these are things that are in our communities that we don't necessarily talk about, but they're learning this, and they're not getting the sex talk. So they're learning it from somewhere. They're learning it from TV. They're learning it from their friends. They're learning it from music. They're learning it from, and then the music videos have just gotten worse.
They're awful. I agree. Those are bad.
So they're learning all of these things from somewhere. So it's definitely, I do hear, I hear what you're saying with that, but it's still feeding into, into that subconscious, and it's feeding into how they think that they're supposed to act.
Yeah,
it's just, I guess, go ahead.
I think it's actually I think it's a combination, Maricela. I think it's a combination of both. What do I mean by that? I mean that there are children who are listening to the music who do not have a strong family foundation or a strong familial structure in place,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that matters as well. Because
That's
like
true.
my aunt said, the music is getting into the subconscious mind, right? And when you are in certain situation, the subconscious mind is going to then feed you those things, like this is what you do in this situation. That's if you don't have that guidance at
Mm-hmm.
home. That person will more so, because it's not just music, it's also celebrity, right? So people are looking at these celebrities like, okay, this, you hear people say all the time, they be quoting these rappers and everything, such as like they quote them like it's a Malcolm X quote, like it's real,
Yeah, that's true.
like for real,
You're so right. Yeah.
no, it's real. And so the woman and the men, it's happening. So I think it's a combination of what my aunt said, and also
Mm-hmm.
them having a strong family unit, right? Where there is guidelines and this is how we conduct ourselves. And so I think that matters. But there's a lot of homes that don't have that, right? And these children are listening to this music, and this music is their instructions for life. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
that's just real. But
Yeah.
I think without one, and family again doesn't mean just mom, dad, children, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe in the village approach, right? I think someone could have an absent mother, but if they have like some strong uncles and aunts and grandparents, like they'll be fine. You know what I'm saying? So when I say family, I don't necessarily just mean the mom, the dad, the children. I mean like you have grandmas, aunties, all of these people that surrounding this child. Every child don't have that, and I think that makes the difference, Maricela,
Mm-hmm.
honestly.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking about it too, because now we're seeing a lot more you know Latino and Black women graduating from college. And
Mhm.
so we typically know what kind of music is being listened to. So I was just trying to, but I do see, I see where you're coming from. There's also a lot of broken homes. So
Yeah, you
I
keep
see.
mentioning college, right? And I just want to be clear, there are a lot of educated people who they have degrees and everything, but the way that they show up, right? You
Mm-hmm.
will probably second guess whether they're educated. So you're
Mm,
pointing at college, and I just want to be clear, like, yeah, you can go and come, but as far as how you conduct yourself in dating, relationships,
Mm-hmm.
um, your sex life, whatever that is, and this is for men and women, it's beyond college. It's sort of how you conduct yourself when maybe you're in public, when you're in a relationship, when you're in a marriage, whatever that may be. Like people talk about reality TV. I think my aunt had touched on it before and saying like she realized like it started to kind of have an effect on her, because that's just the way the mind works, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my aunt is educated, right? But still, watching reality TV still has an effect on you because you're constantly consuming it. So yeah,
Right.
there's plenty of people out there who's college graduates, and I don't know if that would be a measurement for me as to whether the music is affecting them or not. Do you get what I'm saying? Unless it's
yeah.
music that's telling them don't go to college, which that's not the case, right? For the most part. So I know you I just wanted to touch on that because you kind of brought up college like two times. I was like, okay, it's beyond that. We're talking about how this person goes out and do life, right? Because
Right.
if you're listening to, you could be listening to a Cardi B, and I don't listen to Cardi B, so I don't know all Cardi B's lyrics, right? But I don't know. I'm trying to think of somebody else because a lot of this music I don't listen to. I'm really
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know her music.
trying. But okay, let me just be broad. You can listen to a song that's telling you that you are to like use men, for example, right? I could have a PhD and still conduct myself like that.
Mm-hmm.
No,
And
you're
so,
right. You're
yeah,
Right,
absolutely
right.
right.
yeah,
There's a lot of toxic women who graduated from college, you know. There's toxic women who, you know, they I mean, I think a lot of times because we've been, and I think that's maybe something we need to touch on, because I think a lot of times when we we learn about college, and when we're younger, and we're told to go to college and make something of yourself, and this is what you'll get the American dream by going to college and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And so I think we have to be careful of making it like a barometer of other things that are happening in our lives, because there are a lot of people who haven't gone to college and they are balanced people. They're, it's educate, just getting because like yes, I went to college and stuff like that, but that's not what has made me and who made
Right.
me the person who I am.
Mhm.
It's my healing journey, it's my education, my self-education, not necessarily college. So I think we have to kind of separate the two, because there are, that's kind of the thing. And not to bring Kevin Samuels to it, but that's kind of something that is talked about, as far as like, women who go to college, they're kind of the ones who kind of say, I don't need a man, and that's to me, that's a toxic thing to say. And so we do have to kind of separate the two, because I don't think they're synonymous, or they align.
Okay.
Go ahead, Maricela.
No, I think that's just a good point you ladies brought up, because I see that. I see how you're saying there are a lot of educated women at this particular point in time that are saying, well, I don't need a man. I'll have, if I want a kid, I'll have it on my own.
Yeah.
Can we link a generational trait that caused that?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Sorry. I'm glad you brought that up. Because one of the ones that I had down, and Maricela, I mean, feel free to speak to this from your cultural angle, right? From your perspective, what you observe in your culture, that's fine. Please, 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 if you hear something that resonate, be like, we do that too.
Will do.
But
Will do.
the strong, independent Black woman trope. Ooh, we just need to go ahead and ball that up. Just ball it up nicely. Throw it in the fire and let it burn slowly. Okay, we just need to go ahead and let that burn. That's one that's passed down, and it's kind of what you're saying. It contributes to the I don't need a man, right? Um, this idea, I have an issue. For me, I began to break that off of my own life. It's not like, and I keep saying this is not like your parents or your family is sitting and teaching you these things like finger to the face, you better not depend. That's not what's happening. Most of us learn this from observation. Okay. And let's be honest. There are a lot of women who have seen the woman in their family do okay for themselves without a man. Right? So it's not this deliberate thing like I'm anti-man when you hear women say that. They are going off of what they've probably seen their entire life, right? And if you see the woman in your family that they're not married, they're single, but they're making it happen, they're educated, they're raising their child, like that's what you've observed. So it's not, most women who say that, it's not that they're coming from an anti-man place, right? They're just coming from a place of patterns. This is what I know. This is what I've seen. I have an issue with the strong, independent Black woman trope because I think it is detrimental to Black women's existence and Black women's health. I think that it creates an environment where Black women don't want to be vulnerable, where Black women actually think being strong is their identity, right? And so when they need to cry, they refuse to cry, right? When they need to stop, they keep going. And that those stresses is creating issues in our bodies. And it's creating issues as far as our mental health goes. I want to see more Black women saying, no, I am not strong today or tomorrow. And if you see me next week, I might not be strong. And that's okay. And that's okay, right? it also puts us in a situation where our men come into our lives and they cannot figure out for the life of them where they fit. Because if you got all the muscles to do everything, then why am I here?
Right. Right.
Right. And I think it's keeping a lot of us single. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to say it. It's keeping a lot of us single, right? I just want us to do away with that whole, strong, independent. I mean, I'm okay with being interdependent, but like this independent thing, none of us can do it on our own. And the people who are tempted to do it on their own, they are struggling and they are hurting in silence. And I want to see more of our women just kind of relinquish that way of thinking, because that's something that's passed on, right? Whether it's said to us or not, we observe it. And I take issue with it. Don't bring that over here. Oh, you're strong, but no. So then we start thinking like, simply because we are Black, we are then expected to be strong and independent, right? And here's the other thing that I realized. It actually, so if you read, there's this book called Medical Apartheid, right? And if you read any other books as far as our relationship as far as the medical industry in America, right? And how they used to operate on Black people, right? Without, what do you call that stuff when they give it the anesthesia, right? You used to be very much awake, and they would do all these experiments, right, on people. I actually think that when we push that strong Black woman trope, is the same thing. People actually start to deal with us almost like we're not human. And I actually think it puts us in a place sometimes where we end up in relationships and the men don't feel the need to properly protect us because, oh, you got it. Oh, you got it. You're fine. Even I was talking earlier with someone, I had to stop this. I stopped this about a year ago where, we talk to each other like this. Someone comes to us with a problem, right? And they're hurting and they're, crying or whatever. We quickly shut them up by saying what? Oh, you'll be fine. You'll be all right. I had to stop doing that about a year ago because I think it's very dismissive, right? Of people's emotions and allowing people to really express themselves. We see this a lot in our community, right? And I actually think that still goes back to the whole idea of the independent, strong Black woman. I hate that. If you guys can't tell, I'm probably doing a good job of like really not expressing how I really feel about it. But I think it's something that we really need to like relinquish and get rid of. I think Black women need to be more softer in safe spaces, because not every space is safe enough for you to soften. Let's be clear on that. I think we need to be more vulnerable with each other and more authentic as far as where we're at, and stop feeling the need to constantly present as we're all right. It's okay not to be okay. It is okay not to be okay. And so that's kind of one of the big ones I wanted to throw in there. Maricel, I don't know if you see the same thing in your community.
I see it in my daughter, even today. We were talking about how she's been feeling lately, and I looked at her and she's like, "Stop looking at me, Mom, because I'm going to cry and I don't need to cry." I'm like, "You do need to cry though. I can see it in your heart. You need to cry, honey. Just, it's okay." And she's just like, "No, Mom, I don't want to talk about this anymore." So that just made so many things click in my head because, co-parenting wise, they're two completely different views. In my culture, so how I was raised, my mom would always tell us, be independent, do things on your own, but she would never let us neglect being there for my father or the men that earned their spot in our life. So if we have family events, my dad is getting his plate first. My brother's going to be asked if he needs to grab a plate. My uncles. So we're very attentive in that way. So we have always been taught, like, you are independent, but recognize that you also need, that partner if they're deserving. I think nowadays I see a lot of my younger cousins also still, and I don't know if it's a tradition thing. I don't know. I just think in my culture, the way I was raised, and it's very different from Dominican Republic, Puerto Ricans, because I'm Mexican. Like there is still that sense of honoring your man, your provider, kind of a thing, where yes, we're independent. Yes, we're told to go to school, finish school. But even with a friend, or not a friend, a coworker I had, she was going to school and her husband was making sure to pay all the bills while she went to school. And she just had to work like a little part-time job. So I find it so interesting, because, like I said, even today, the conversation that I had with my daughter, here she is, young, trying to be strong. When I was her age, if I needed to cry, I'm crying, and my grandpa is coming to my rescue, kind of a thing. Do you guys see in the Black community ever feeling, oh, there she is, ever feeling somebody to rely on as far as a male figure?
Say that last part again, Maricela.
This is my little one, everybody. She wanted to make an appearance today. Do you guys ever see or have ever needed anybody to rely on as a male figure? Like, have you ever had that?
Okay. So I know for me, like I come from a single mother household. So, and my dad was in a whole nother state. Um, so I didn't, and one thing, and I said this on another show before, is that I didn't see anyone really, any men. I had there's lots of men in my family, but I didn't necessarily see a lot of men actually step up and say, hey, let me kind of take on this role. But at the same time, my mother is that independent Black woman, right? So a lot of people see her as very, she's strong, she's assertive, she's that picture of what an independent, strong Black woman would be. And so I didn't see that. I think, and I see the same thing in my daughter, my 9-year-old daughter, and she is the one that speaks her mind. And sometimes you're like low, you kind of be like, okay, you're borderline disrespectful. And so, but at the same time, I love that she does express herself, but on the same token, she does not like seeing people seeing her cry. So when I see her, like she is on the verge of tears, I'll say what's wrong, and she doesn't. She'll go to her room and cry, but she does not like, she doesn't like other people seeing her cry. But I think that is something that is kind of passed on. I don't know necessarily think that she got that necessarily from me, because I am a person that will cry. Like if I feel like I need to cry, I will cry. As far as if I feel like I'm in a safe space. But one thing that I wanted to address, even when Hanifa was saying about us having that strong, that independent, strong kind of Black woman kind of perception, and how that kind of might have led to us even being, the medical procedures not getting that anesthesia. And that really comes from the past being on that plantation. I can't remember, so don't quote me on this. I think it was Thomas Jefferson. I don't know. I can't remember, but it was one of them folks who said that, that's what they compared Black people to. They compared them to, being they're less than human, they're animals, and that they do not feel pain. There was like they had like this fake pseudoscience stuff saying that we don't feel pain, so we didn't need to do certain things and to work on this, and giving reasons, that whole sun up to sundown kind of concept, giving reasons why they work harder on the plantation and things like that. So that carried on to us. So now we do feel that we feel like we're superhuman, and that's a whole nother conversation, because we can have that conversation. But to being a Black woman and understanding that you do sometimes you need someone to tell you, stop what you're doing too much. And so there was a study that I had read a few months ago where it was saying people who are in relationships or who are married, and this is on men and women, they tend to live longer because they have someone telling them, hey, did you take your vitamins? Hey, I want to, eat healthy. Hey, take a break. And I mean, I see that firsthand. My husband was like, you're doing too much. You need to stop. So we
Mhm.
have to understand that, this is something we have learned. We learned this independent Black woman kind of concept. And even as a married woman, I do that. I tend to take all these things on my shoulder and say, and then when I get stressed, I lash out. When I get stressed, I'm like, and it is like almost like the world is against you when it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And so I think it's something that we do have to unlearn and see, because even now that I'm kind of thinking about it, I'm thinking, where is my daughter learning that? But then I realize that she is probably learning some of those things from me, because there are some things that I see her doing that she does pick up from me, so she is picking up as doing all of these, doing all these things because she tells me, I want to be just like you.
Hmm.
So, so
That's so
we
sweet.
do we do have to take, like, we have to kind of like self analyze and see what are these different traits that they're picking up from us.
So that brings me back to when my first point of the toxic trait as a woman, because I can't speak for men and I would never. For me, in my culture, it's like I said, it's you're serving your provider, that kind of a thing. So it's an act of selflessness and being guilted and ashamed of being selfish. Is that kind of what you're speaking on, Maya? Is that where, I guess, maybe I'm not hearing it, or maybe I'm
Mhm.
misunderstanding what you're saying, but do you see that in, or do you, Hanif and Mayat, do you guys see that in your guys' culture? Because in mine, I see a lot of women, because maybe they don't need to be strong, they fall back. They don't participate in self-care of any kind. They're always just making sure everybody else is okay. And I kind of heard that from my aunt right now. Um, like I
Mhm.
said, if where there's family gatherings, you're gonna see every single man usually with a drink or a plate first, then the children, and then the women will,
Mhm.
go get theirs,
And that's
or
that's
whatever.
that's something I think is culturally, especially down south. I fully don't have an issue with it, because I I tend to be a nurturer. So I tend to do things like that. I tend to give my husband his food. I tend to do things like that. But I do also know that a lot of times when I do sit down to eat, if I cooked and I sit down to eat, my food is cold. So it's one of those things that we have to play a balancing act with, because sometimes we do things to the detriment of ourselves. So if I'm if I'm really talking about self-care, or it's kind of like, I think about the airplane where you put the mask on yourself first. So we have to have a point where we are saying, well, I have to take care of myself, because if I'm completely empty, I can't help the others around me. So it stems from the way that we feel about ourselves. It kind of reminds me of what Dr. Joy DeGroy talks about in vacant esteem. And so we don't have that esteem, like that self esteem for ourselves. We might even be married, we might be in a relationship, it can be a lot of things, but we don't have esteem in ourselves when we look in the mirror every day. And sometimes it's subconscious. We don't necessarily value ourselves. We value the other people around us more than we value ourselves. So we tend to do more for other people before we do to ourselves. And that's a journey you have to go on. You have to heal those thoughts that you have. And honestly, remember, we're talking about toxic traits passed on from generation to generation, your thoughts are usually not your own. There's something that have been implanted in you. So when you look in the mirror and you say, I don't know, my eye's too big, those are not thoughts you have, because somebody has conditioned you to tell you that your eyes are too big. Your nose is too big, your lips too big, whatever it is. Somebody has conditioned you to tell you those things about yourself. And so what happens as the time goes on, then you start believing those things. And so then believing those things is a reflection of the choices that you tend to make. Because since I don't value myself, somebody has told me, has implanted in me certain things about myself. Now I'm going to reflect that by doing these sort of, even if somebody, I remember getting called like fat when I was younger, or saying I was too big. And so my reflection, it was starting to reflect in what I chose. I'm fat. They think I'm fat anyway, or I'm fat anyway, or you start eating things because you're just like, well, that's what I am. That's what I'm supposed to be. And I see everybody else around me who looks like that too, and they seem okay. It's kind of going back to what Hanifa was saying. Like, we see an independent, strong woman, and we say, "Oh, well, she has it together." And you'll see people, even though they're on prescription drugs, will say, "Oh, they seem like they're living a good life." But we don't really know how good we're supposed to feel. Like Dr. Sabi said, that we really don't know how good we're supposed to feel, how happy we're supposed to feel, how good we can feel day to day, because we're still consuming toxicity. And toxicity is something, it was something I said in a video. Those toxic foods sustain the toxic aspect of yourselves, which means whatever you're absorbing that is toxic is sustaining whatever toxicity that is already there.
So I was surprised actually, when Maricela just asked that question. I was surprised none of us mentioned that. Putting that, because most women deal with this in general, where we have learned to put ourselves last. Everyone comes before us. The
Right.
self-care, self-love is not selfish movement. Is fairly new. It's sort of a new wave that's happening right now. And so a lot of women are actually assessing their own lives and saying, you know something, I've allowed my, being a mother to define me, being a daughter to define me, whatever that is. And women are now stepping out of that and actually giving themselves oxygen first, my aunt, right? Because they're realizing, if I don't take care of me, I am no good to anyone else. You cannot be the best version of yourself if you constantly put yourself last. You just can't. It's almost impossible to do so, right? For me, what I started with for myself is thinking, how many hours in a day, right? And I started tiding my time, and the 10% of that time goes to me, right? That's what I started to think. I'm going to tide because I'm a mother, right? And I'm a mother of a toddler, right? And if anyone has toddlers, they
Yes.
rule the world. They rule the world. You are in their space, right? And you are nothing but a servant, right? Until they get to another age. But toddlers just, they have their
Yes.
own thing, right? And so for me, I have to, like, okay, I need to tide my time. What does that mean? What 10% of whatever my day consists of, however many hours. Now I could say, okay, that means I get 2 hours out of the day. Okay, then how do I break up those 2 hours? What I do for myself is, in the morning, the first thing I try to do is get a morning reading. I love to read. So that 30 minutes goes by like this. If the house is still quiet, that 30 minutes become an hour. I don't apologize for it. My escape is reading. When I'm stressed, if I read, it calms me down. That is my thing, right? So I give myself that time. And then in the evening time, I usually try to get some time so I could be on the internet, just surfing, or I might decide I'm going to watch a series. It doesn't matter what I do with my time. That ain't nobody's business, right?
Right.
That's my time, right? But making that time for myself, I have to be deliberate. Most women, we have to actually, it's a fight for us to put ourselves first. Because the way that we
Absolutely.
have, yes, it is the way that we've been taught. I would even dare say the way we're wired, right? It's
Oh,
almost
yeah.
like, no, you feel guilty when you try to put yourself first. For goodness sake, I can go and get my feet and my nails done, and my feet and my hands done, my nails done, right? And I'm in the salon, like, how long have I been in here? And I start thinking about what my 2-year-old is doing, and all the while he's at home with his dad, but I'm still worried about what he's doing, right? And I have to talk myself through that oftentimes. So as women, I was shocked none of us mentioned that, because we are taught, whether it's directly or indirectly, right? When I say directly, some of us, it's like, no, go give your father, your uncle, somebody, serve them a plate, do this, make sure their laundry's done or whatever. Some of us we already programmed that way from the time we are little girls, right? And so we grow up and we are so used to putting others before ourselves. It's a very difficult habit to break. But for me, I tell people all the time, take it one day at a time, right? Make sure every day that you awake, that you allot a time for yourself. It could be first thing in the morning, and I choose the morning because that's when the house is quiet. No one is up. I'm usually the first one up. Then I take that time for myself. I choose to use that time reading. That's just my thing, because it gets my mind going for the day, right? It could be something as simple as just not doing anything. Because sometimes when we have time, we think we gotta fill it with doing things. Sometimes it's as simple as sitting your behind down and crossing your legs in that chair and ain't saying nothing, just really just sitting with yourself. That's also a form of self-care as well. But yes, as women, we struggle with that big time. I also wanted to mention, for those who are boy moms like myself, my sons, for example, this idea of men not emoting, right? My son, when he gets upset, for me, I try to teach him how to properly breathe it through, right? To take his deep breaths, teach him how to calm himself down, and also to ask, why are you upset right now? And allow him to speak. I don't have to agree with what he's saying, but what I do owe him is to hear him out. It doesn't mean that I agree. It doesn't mean he's even going to get his way. But allowing him the space to do so, for me, I feel like I'm teaching him. I'm preparing him for his wife, honestly. Because my thing is like, listen, ladies out there, you guys that have daughters, please prepare your children for my son as well, because I'm preparing him for yours. But
I hear you.
in a relationship and things get tense, he don't just feel like he has to shut off, because he's been shut up his whole entire life, right? So I try to be very conscious and deliberate in when I'm communicating with my son, when he's upset, when he's trying to express that anger. And just teaching him how to properly do so, right? Because anger does not have to necessarily be a bad thing. It's actually a secondary emotion according to psychology, right? So that means that there's something driving that anger. And for me, I'm teaching him how to peel back the layers to actually deal with what the root of his anger is. What's driving your anger? Are you angry or do you feel betrayed?
Oh, wow.
Right.
I never even thought of that. That is,
because anger is something that comes after. So what are you really angry about? That's what you need to get to the root of, right? And I'll give you guys this last example. I was talking to my king, right? And we're in the living room, and he's sharing with me something about myself, right? And saying like, just along the lines of like, not allowing people to exploit me for my intellectual property or just in general, right? And this is like way before I even like started this show, whatever. And we're having conversations in general. And I kept pushing back at him, like, well. And then when he left the living room, I sat with it because it made me very uncomfortable. And I realized in that moment, the reason why I was making excuses and pushing back is because I didn't want to face the fact that I was allowing people to use me. I didn't want to face that fact. I didn't want to accept that about myself, right? That's strong, we're not, that's not what we do. We're not weak, right? And so I was just like, oh my gosh, I think. And so when he came back upstairs, I had to tell him, I apologize. I know why I was like pushing back at you. It was really uncomfortable for me to accept that, yes, I am allowing people to use me for these different reasons, right? And so as an adult, I had to learn that, but I'm trying to give my children a head start in how they can sit with their feelings and process through them. Because the last thing I want to speak to too is the feelings part. I know in our culture, what I realize is a lot of us, we are living in our heads and not our bodies.
Right.
We exist here, right? But there's nothing there. We are completely disconnected from our bodies. Our bodies are in auto drive. We are really living from our heads.
Right.
And so when I say that, I notice with a lot of us, Black women, Black men as well, we really have an issue with really feeling what we're feeling. We find a way to escape whatever it is that, it might be a feeling that's just uncomfortable. It might even be a feeling that we are not familiar with, so we don't really know how to process it, right? And so we find ways to kind of get around it. But that's a big one that I constantly have to process, even within myself, really allowing myself to sit with an emotion and be like, this feels crappy as hell, but there's something in there for me to learn. There's something in there for me to learn. And one of the things that we also need to be reminded of is oftentimes when your trauma or your experiences, bad experiences, become your identity, healing can often feel like you're losing yourself.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Healing can feel like you're losing yourself once your trauma becomes your identity. So when you start to really deal with that trauma and to release even some of this stuff that we're talking about, right? It can often put you in a space where you're like, well, who the hell am I? What am I supposed to do with this new, this new me? What am I supposed to do with this information, with this new level of consciousness, with this knowledge that I have now? Because this is uncharted territory. I don't really know what to do. And my thing to anyone that I have the conversation with is like, if it's uncharted territory, then build. Then begin to build. It is a clean slate, right? What would you have done instead of what your trauma have informed you should do? Now that you've dealt with the trauma, right? And we've gotten that out of the way and we've healed that. What would you have been doing instead? That is what you do. That is what you do. If you said I would have gone into relationship and took the risk if I didn't have trust issues, and now that you got to the root of your trust issues and you start to deal with them, then go into relationships 100%. Life is about risk. When you walk out the door in the morning and get in your car, you're taking a risk. More people die in car accidents than, like, it's a risk. We take them every single day. So now that you deal with that, now that you've dealt with that, if you're saying, if I didn't have this trauma that caused my trust issues, I would have actually taken more risk in life. Now that you've healed that trauma and it's no longer your identity, being distrustful, you know what I'm saying? If that, now that that's no longer your identity, now go ahead and take those risks in life. Do it. So yeah, I just wanted to add that oftentimes we're traumatized and it's become our identity. And so when we begin to heal, we actually feel like we're losing ourselves. And I promise you, as someone who's constantly doing the work, you are not losing yourself. Right. You're creating space for you to create something new and build on the good that you already have. But so you ladies could jump in at any time.
Do you feel then, because I know for myself, I think another trait is not allowing for change. I think for me, like I said, yes, there's been single mothers in my family or in my culture, but as far as stepping out and being with a person of another race. I was the first. How is that felt on the Black community? Is that is it seen as a generational curse? Is it seen as like we're not able to protect what's ours? I know for the longest, there's been that conflict. I mean, we just had a show not that long ago about the differences between Black and Latinas. So can we talk about that? Do we feel okay to bring that up as a trait of not allowing for change?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at that. So when I first heard you say looking at change, I thought about how a lot of times when we are changing who we are. So even when we're healing, when we're going through this healing process, there are things that we see differently, and then that looks like betrayal to the people who raised us or the people in our family. So a lot of times, even with our spiritual systems, like that looks like if you change your spiritual system, especially in I don't know how it is in other cultures, but in Black culture, you change that spiritual system, you change that identity of who God is. That is that's betrayal. How dare you how dare you change what I've taught you, what I've instilled in you? And a lot of times, because people people are older, they think that they are wiser and that they know better, and that you're not supposed to ask any questions. And and that's the whole issue that I mainly have, is that you're not supposed to ask any questions. You are just supposed to follow, even though there are lots of questions to be asked. Now, to the other side of interracial and things like that, there is a deeper, I think, within the Black community, it goes a lot deeper, because what's happening is that we're not necessarily choosing people in. I'll 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 keep it to who I know, not necessarily everyone. But there are a lot of times people choose someone of another culture because of how they feel about themselves. And so that is again going kind of back to that vacant esteem. And so that's why you'll see that there are some people who will, and you see it on both sides. You see it with Black women, you'll see, because growing up, something that I feel like was a toxic trait that I would hear like my grandmother say or some other people say, they will say things like, you need to go get you a Italian. You need to go get you a white man because they're gonna treat you better. So what is that putting in the psyche of a black girl or a Black? It's telling you that Black men ain't gonna treat you right, right? Like that's what's being told to us. And so it's not necessarily, to me, about whether we're losing our men and things like that. It's more about what you see in yourself and why you're choosing that. Because what I hear from a lot of Black women is, when you're choosing, that Black man is choosing that other culture, they're also downing the culture that they're coming from. Well, Black women, they don't know how to act, so it's that. So I know I'm kind of it. That's why I say it's a lot deeper than just saying that it's kind of a betrayal for going to another race. It's how you view yourself. And just a short story, and I'm going to let our guest speak. But like, I have someone in my family who did um who did choose to be with another culture. And one thing that I do know about him, and I even told him that he needed to get some healing, was I knew that he was choosing that because of how he felt about his mother, how he felt about the women in the family, and how he felt about himself. They say that the more oppressed that you feel, the more you have a tendency and I'm saying in the Black culture, not necessarily in other cultures. In the Black culture, you have a tendency to look at other cultures as being better. And in other words, if you're looking at other cultures as being better, then you're also looking at I want to marry into that. I want to date into that culture because I see them as being better than my own.
And I hear you, Maya, but again, I feel like that's a little bit of, I only speak for myself. In my situation, there was a little bit of a pushback of, well, we're not accepting. Not saying that not my family necessarily, but within my culture, I do see that sometimes it's not accepting of change, of knowing that we are a global, even on in our community here, you know, I think plenty of times King has said this is a global community. Everybody is welcome here. We have people from all kinds of backgrounds. Um, so I guess I'm just trying to understand, because I know it is a toxic trait to not accept change, right? Um, the way that you described it to me, I understand how it would be betrayal, because I the same thing, I've heard it in my community and in my culture. Um, oh, so you think so and so is better than a such and such? I get it. I've heard it too, but I'm gonna sit on that and kind of think it a little bit through. But thank you, Chaotic Truth, for joining us.
Hi, Chaotic. Welcome back, sir. It's good to see your face again. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you very much. How you guys doing?
Good.
I have been panel hopping all night, and I did a live stream, and I saw your topic, and I've been listening long enough to broach the topic and the current conversation piece right here, dealing with being told about dating, interracial dating, right? So that's what we're talking about. Okay. I too was told this by family members and by individuals within the community that, hey, you shouldn't date other groups of people. Now, I think the tragedy of this type of information is that it creates a little bit hostility in terms of mingling with other people outside of just something in a romantic nature. When I was a kid growing up, again, I grew up around all types of kids. I went to both public and private schools. I lived in a upper middle class neighborhood. But when I was told you shouldn't date white women, you shouldn't bring them over, you shouldn't be around them, it made it seem like these people were untouchable, to the point like if you're around them and something happens, you're gonna go to jail or something's gonna happen, etc. And so it put a kind of like fear in me about being around, mingling with especially a white girl. But then the more I got to be around white girls and around other groups of people, I said, damn, if I would have really listened to like these older blacks and these things of this magnitude, I would never be able to network and do business and get connections and stuff. If I would have just listened to this codified lineal I guess belief. And I think that's something that's passed down. A lot of times, to be completely honest with you, the people who are telling you this information never had any problems with white people themselves. They were told this. And to be completely honest, their great grandparents told their grandparents, who told their parents, who in turn told us. And it's sort of like a game of telephone. Like, it's like, oh, don't mess with them. And really, nothing really has ever happened when I've been around other people. I've gotten into more trouble being around blacks than whites and other groups of people. So I think it is kind of limiting ourselves when we tell our children. I don't have any children, but you tell our children these things, etc. Because you want people to have a free mind. You want people to experience. And a lot of times, man, if you're intelligent and you know how to vet, you know who's right to be around and wrong. A lot of times, breaking free of what people are telling you will really benefit you. Again, some of my best friends are white people, and particularly, can I say the J word on here, Miss Flowers?
We know who you're talking about.
Okay, yeah, Jews. And it's like, well, damn, if I would have never mingled with them, what would happen? Would I be confided to be around these Negroes or black people, I say Negroes respectfully because I like saying it. But in terms of my own thoughts, yes, I was told not to date white girls and bring them over. I was told that if a white girl is in your arms and she gets hurt and cries wolf, your black ass is going to jail. Yeah, I was told all this, and I've been with white girls in my past. But I still prefer black women. I don't know why, despite all the nagging and attitudes.
You know why? You know
Oh,
why?
wait a minute now.
Let's not all, maybe the ones you came across, maybe, but not all of them.
Well, I'm
And
actually married to a beautiful black woman.
No. I was actually pulling your leg when you said you don't know why, and I was like, you know why? Don't do us like that. But no. What I was gonna speak to was, you talked about like your parents and their parents and so forth. And so as you were speaking, I was like, so we do understand where the distrust comes from. We're very clear on that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I think what you're talking about is moving forward. Yes, times have changed, but not so much. I just want to be clear on that. Yeah. So I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that there is an understanding to what you're talking to and why those things were passed down. Because the truth be told, had you been in your great grandmother's time or so, and you talk about, I've been with some white girls, you may have been lynched. Okay, so that's a real thing. So when families were warning their children, their black children, about that was for their protection, because that was their reality, right? And so even though the times have changed somewhat from that, there's still a distrust there, right? The same thing with doctors, black people, and getting checkups and so forth, right? There's a history behind why that's the way it is. So when we talk about these things, we can understand the history, but that doesn't mean that we can't make the effort to change it. So I'm speaking to what you're saying, to where you're saying, I've met white people and they're not all these, they're not all devils, right? That's what you're saying. And I'm saying, yes, we can make that effort, but let's not dismiss what was told to us as if there is no historical context to it. Right.
Now, Hanifa.
Yes, chaotic.
Now, I heard everything you said, and I don't disagree with your position. One thing I will say is this: in the course of my 37 years on this planet, the people who have done me wrong, I gotta say that they were black. Unfortunately, it's the truth. Now, hear me out. Wait a minute, because I'm not taking up for whitey. But hear me out for a minute. Now, the people who've done me wrong have been black. I've tried to do business with black people. I've tried. Black people are the only people I do business with. They ask me, what that mean? What's your business model? I do business with whites, Jews. Oh, hey, buddy, I give you extra. Oh, I swear to God.
So, chaotic. I'm going to interrupt you right here.
Okay.
So this is so the conversation. I know you. No, it's okay. No.
I'm just saying. Okay.
Sir, you can put your arms down. There is no attack.
I talk with my arms.
Oh no, you had it up like you're surrendering. There's no need to surrender because there's no attack here. We're having a conversation. But what I was going to say is, we were discussing in general just things that have been passed down, and you did list one. And you came in on where Maricela was speaking about, like, just refusing change, in other words. And you came in on that end. So I'm going to ask you, since you're here on the panel, right? And you seem to be excited about talking to us.
Absolutely.
Are there any like toxic things that you could say you break in your family that was not just the one that you mentioned, but like any other things that you could say, yes, I break this, and can you tell us how you went about doing so?
Hanifa, the number one. Now, I'm going to speak for myself. I can't speak for every black person. I'm going to speak for myself on this. Ain't nothing like some black people who love working for other people. I grew up, that's all I heard. You got to work for people. You got to work for people. You got to work for people. Yeah, that's how it always has been. I said, Dad, listen, man. I would rather live in a dumpster before I work for anybody. I like working for myself. I like doing my own thing. I like making my own dollar. And I've had a lot of issues, even to this day, with my parents about this. And what I've tried to tell them is that it doesn't matter what your profession is. You have a cap. You have a limit on what you can make. You have to answer to people. You have to go to meetings. You gotta, being an entrepreneur is hard. It's tough. If anybody is real young, this is a disclaimer. Don't try it. Do what your parents tell you, but I can't do it. I'm telling you, when I broke that curse, I'm so much free than the people that I know, than my family, etc. Yeah, some of my family makes, high six figures, and I'm talking about 200, 300,000 in the medical field, but they're miserable. They're always, I have this and I have that, but if you have all of that, why are you telling me about it? You should be free and happy with it. The thing is that I would, when I started making my own dollar, I had a friend, and he said this to me. I'll never forget what he's still a friend. He said, man, sometimes I just admire your freedom, man. Like, you could just do what you want to do. And I said, man, that's the beauty of breaking that cycle that has been passed on in the Black community, that we have to work for people. A lot of Black people that I know are miserable. They have good jobs, but they're miserable. I know lawyers. I know well, I'm a fraternity, so of course I know all these people. I know engineers. They're so miserable, and their hair is falling out. I'm one of the only people that I know who is almost 40 who has thick hair. I'm like, I have thick hair because I do what I want to do every day.
So chaotic.
I'm blacking out. Go ahead.
Yeah. I see.
But you get my point though, Hanifa. Go ahead.
Yes, I get
That's the cycle that I broke.
But that was a good one, because I was going to let my Ata Maricela respond to that. That was a really good one, because it's more so the idea of like repeating, just go to college, right? So you have children sometimes coming out of 12th grade, Black children, and they're not sure. They just know that they have to go to college. So to speak to your point, where it's go work for someone else, is get your college education and get you a good job, right? That's pretty much the advice that was passed down to us. But if my aunt or Maricela have anything to respond to as far as what Chaotic said, because he said a mouthful and I did interrupt you. My apologies, sir. I come in peace when I have to interrupt, but I just didn't want the conversation to get derailed. I wanted to kind of keep us on our center. But my aunt or Maricela, if you guys want to respond to the guests.
Yeah, so I think that we have to be careful when we talk about generational trauma being somebody working for a job, because there are people who have jobs that they absolutely love. I do agree that that's not something necessarily. I am in that kind of mind frame where I was told, and most of us were told, and I think different cultures are told, not just us. But we have to go back to the historical history, because that's what they were sold. They were sold that kind of concept. Go get you an education, and get you a job, and then life is going to be wonderful. You're going to have your big house, nice car. That's something that we've been told, but that is what we've been passed down. So we are kind of seeing the shift, but we also can't turn our backs on people who do have jobs and they love their jobs, because those mostly are the people who are, I'm not sure what you do, but those are the people who are paying for your paying for your services. So a lot of times our entrepreneurs do have this tendency to say, hey, I made it out. I don't have to, I don't have a 9 to 5, but let me look down on you, person who is paying for my services. So we have to be careful with that. I do want to kind of touch on, because I'm not really sure where you're from, but I kind of want to touch on what you were saying. And Hanifa, she said it very well about the historical history in our grandparents or even our parents. They were told, that there were certain things that were happening in history that would say that if you're around a white girl, this is what's going to happen. And so it's even the same conversation that we have with our kids now. When we're in the store, we don't want our kids touching certain things and doing certain things because we don't want them to be, we don't want them to think that they're stealing. And when we talk about Black people, because the where you are, and someone said it in the chat, where you are, proximity to whoever you are, that is who you're going to encounter the most. So if you're around white people more, so I was in private school and public school. So private school, when I was in private school, the people who did me the worst were white people because that's who I was around a lot. But then when I went to public school, I was around more Black people. So the people who did me worse were the Black people. So the thing is, and I said this time and time again, I didn't turn my back on Black men just because a handful of them did me wrong, because they're not the totality of all Black men. So we have to understand that a lot of times we're talking about people who are traumatized, who are still traumatized, and who continue to get traumatized. And so we're not healing from a lot of things. And that's what this conversation is about. It's about our healing. So yeah, a lot of times they are going to treat you the worst because we are all still healing within our community. And so we have to kind of figure out, a lot of times when you go to someone about business, another Black person about business, they don't trust you. We don't have trust in our community. So they're like, you want how much money from me? So, we have to kind of put that in perspective that yes, white people grew up having a certain type of freedom that we don't have. And so a lot of times they're more willing, and then their access to wealth and all of those things come into play. So, I think a lot of times we have to give our community more grace to get to where you are, because you probably can see that you've had growth. I look at Hanifa, I look at myself, I look at other people who've been on this panel having growth, and we have to understand everybody is not where we are, and we have to kind of encourage. That's what these conversations are for, encouraging growth and healing in our communities so that we can be in business with one another.
I definitely understand your position. I understand your position. But my position, to cover both things, and I heard everything you said.
Okay.
You're a woman. Miss Flowers, I don't want to say your name wrong. Is it Marciela?
It's Maricela.
Okay, Maricela. And I need
Good job.
you guys are women, and women have it different than men. Black, white, doesn't matter. As a man, I have this natural instinct. It probably comes from my ancient DNA from 100,000 years ago of being a hunter-gatherer. Now I'm just talking shit right now. But it's to go out and hunt my own food. I don't know why. I don't know why when I see a deer, you guys have deers where you're from, right? Okay. I don't know why when I see a deer, I just want to kill it and eat it. I don't know why when I'm told to do something by somebody, I say, what? Who is this person? It comes from our ancient ancestral history of being hunters and gatherers. We're all educated here. We know that ancient man was a hunter and gatherer. The reason why when people give a man directives and he looks at another man, it's because men function off of a natural thing to listen to a leader. Again, I grew up with a father, so that was my first leader. So think about 100,000 years ago when we were hunters and gatherers. Men had to go out in units and they had to hunt wild animals that could kill you, whether they were a herbivore or a carnivore. They could kill you. Women did not. Now, hear me out respectfully. There's a reason why women are naturally weaker than men physically. Let's be completely honest. Women didn't have to do that. Women generally were relegated to taking care of the children and taking care of whatever domicile they may have lived in or convened. Those are facts. It's a natural instinct for a man to want his own thing and not be controlled by different tribal groups. When I go to I'm not trying to knock somebody who has a job, but women, you guys have to rely on society. That's how it has always been. The comforts that you guys have right now is because of what men created and men maintain. You wouldn't have a toilet if it wasn't for a man. You wouldn't.
Chaotic.
I think we're getting a little off topic here.
No. Chaotic. I'm going to go ahead and reel you in, sir.
Because I'm about to reel myself in. Just hear me out for a minute.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
So
can you wrap it up, please?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to knock people who have jobs. I was trying to say, as a man, I naturally don't have that in my. It's not a part of my nature. I have to do my own thing, and that's what men have been since the beginning of time. That's all I was trying to say. Now, to piggyback off what you're saying, I understand what you were saying about proximity, but here goes the thing: Black people have Mayat, or what? You're not 200 years old. You weren't around during slavery. I mean, to be respectful and to
we still feel the effects from slavery, though, right? Like, we still feel the effects.
I could also say that I feel the effects from when an ancient ancestor was killed and eaten by a wildebeest. I don't know.
That may be true.
But I agree. There may be some level of scientific fact to epigenetics, which you're talking about. That's called epigenetics, right?
Right.
But what I'm saying is that listen. I think that we make too much excuses with that. I think that none of us have lived through Jim Crow. None of us have lived through slavery. And to be completely honest, is that Black people need to stop with this. I don't trust each other. We got to stop with that. Because if anything, we shouldn't trust white people. If anything, if according to history,
that's true. I mean,
sorry for being.
That's what we're talking about. All of this is connected.
Chaotically truthful, but that's just my position.
Chaotic. I think.
Sorry, Hanifa. I blacked out, Hanifa. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you are wide awake and you are very conscious of what's happening right now. So don't even tell us that. You are intelligent and you are very present right now in this moment. Okay. What is happening, though, is that you are injecting things into the conversation that are not necessary, right? Or don't even connect to the conversation that we were having. This is not a space where we don't understand that men have a role to play and women. This is not that space, right? So there's no need to even go in that direction.
Oh, I didn't mean it like that. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. But as far as what you were saying, and I want to get back on track because we are talking about things that are passed down to generation. Now, if we're speaking about that, you're asking people, you say excuses. That's just another way of saying, oh, it's the victim Olympics, right? We know that that's really what that's what people are labeling it as, right? But the reality is this: if we are going to try to understand how to move forward, we have to first understand how we got to where we're at. Otherwise, where are you going? You don't even know where you come from. Where are you going, right? And then to tell people that they can't discuss how they got to where they're at, how they got in this mess, I think it's actually, disingenuous in a sense. I actually think that it's okay. There's a space for the conversation to be had as to why we're in the mess that we're in, and also enough space to have the conversation as where do we go from here. Now, if the conversation is solely based on the problem and how we got here, then perhaps you can introduce the idea that, hey, this is Victim Olympics. But if the conversation is one around, this is how we got here and this is what we can do to move forward, then there is no space for the idea of excuses or Victim Olympics. And that's not what we're doing here. So that's why I pushed back on you in the beginning and I said, hey, why don't you offer us, which you did so eloquently, why don't you offer us something that you broke in your life? And yours was entrepreneurship, the idea that I can go out there and work for myself. And we appreciate that. But to get into all the other stuff as far as comparing man to woman and woman to man, that is not what this conversation is about. And you sort of went in that direction. And perhaps, maybe you can't help yourself. Maybe you be in a lot of conversations.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to compare. I'm sorry.
I said, it's coming through your pores. It's coming through your pores. It's coming through your pores. So
I was just trying to say how men think. Generally.
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to the conversation, which you answered our question around what you have done in your own life. You identify what the thing was that was passed on, and you identify how you break it. And I want to say thank you for your contribution to that part of the conversation, because I really don't want to get into all of the other stuff. And I also want to allow Maricela to respond if she wanted to. And I mean that with all respect, Chaotic.
You guys are going to kick me off the panel, are you? I mean,
Nah. They
No,
can't,
we
they can't,
definitely
they
wouldn't
can't
do
kick
that
you off
here.
the panel before I say something. Go ahead,
I was
Maricela.
just, yeah, sorry.
No, I just wanted to be clear. I guess the topic where I was coming from was the trait of not allowing for change, right? So I just want to make sure nobody was offended. This isn't a comparison of what kind of woman race is better. There's greatness in each race, in each ethnicity. I mean, you have your own story, chaotic truth, and that's awesome. But I think it's important here on our platform. We definitely support all flowers, Black women, Latino, Asian, white. So I just want to make sure nobody was felt any kind of way by being compared, because everybody here has a quality. So back to the topic.
Wait, Maricela, can we go ahead and shift? Chef, if you didn't have anything, I know we're wrapping up, but
yeah.
I know we wanted to make sure that we talked about some of the good things and the greatness that we inherited as well. So I wanted to shift the conversation in that direction before we actually wrapped up. So you or my ad can start if Chef didn't have. I don't know if he was coming to speak to chaotic or not.
Oh yeah, well the only thing pretty much I had to say was in regards to I don't want to say the spirit of what he was saying, but what I would glean from just the only time that I've seen him online and I've seen him on the show, I don't know if he fully. Oh, there you go. What's up, bro?
What's up?
Good to see you.
You too.
Where you come from, you seem to come from. Well, I don't want to use the word privilege. You seem to come from a blessed existence and understanding, and I think that you are wise enough, erudite enough to be able to understand that there are some blessings that you have. The only question that I have is for me is, sometimes we as human beings, we tend to equate our blessings, or what atheists would consider luck, or agnostics would consider luck. We tend to equate those blessings with some specific set of tasks that we had undertaken. Right. So now for you, we talk about studies, right? So when you talk about scientific studies, you have the test group and you have the control group. The control group, that's the one that's used to establish a cause and effect relationship by isolating the effects of an independent variable, right? Test group is the one that receives the placebo. They get nothing. So they are not impacted by the actual aspects of the test. So now, I say that to ask you two questions. One thing is, do you believe that you happen to have been blessed, given everything that's taken place with our people? Blessed either by virtue of situations took place, blessed by virtue of your proximity to a deeper subset of opportunities, right? Those two things. And then the other one, confirmation bias, right? What is confirmation bias? That's the tendency for experimenters to give their expected outcomes too much weight when measuring results, leading to inaccurate findings, which means that, results determine correlation and causation. So I said all of that long-winded stuff to say, who's to say that your theory is right and you may not just be a really lucky / privileged / blessed brother within this community?
60 seconds, chaotic. 60 seconds.
It's a possibility. I definitely see your position, and it's definitely a possibility. It's a possibility that I am blessed. Now, to your second question was more or less, um, what was your second question again? Because so
The second part was basically speaking to confirmation bias and the tendency for experimenters to give their expected outcomes too much weight when measuring results, leading to inaccurate findings. So they
okay,
pretty much came hand in hand. One was the hand, one was the glove. You get what I'm saying?
okay,
But
so
they both intertwine in that. So basically, maybe you were just lucky, bro. Did you ever take that into consideration?
you mean lucky to never have gone through what certain people have gone through?
Lucky, blessed, privileged to not have gone through what they have gone through, but to have come out to the place where you are, where you can have the mindset that you have. Because, you know, if I listen to what you're stating, you're in a great place in spite of the things that normally impact the community. And it almost seemed as though you had some sort of mission or plan or some set of ideas
Okay,
that you feel would have been the thing that might be able to help. So when I ask you that,
okay, yeah.
I'm asking you, because I do that to myself. There's times where I think I'm that dude, but in the end, I'm like, shit, maybe I just got lucky. You get
Well,
what I'm saying?
nah, I do. Okay. So I get what you're saying. So I definitely take the position that we are very lucky, in me, to be in the same direction. We are lucky compared to an individual who is born in Liberia. You know, you, so I do see it like that. It's like, damn, I could have been. I think about that every day. I think about the fact that I could have been born in Liberia. There's really no sanitation grids there. There's really a poor electrical grid.
I've been there. My daughter's
Yeah.
Liberian.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Oh, I was gonna say some of the beautiful people I've met in my life are from I rocked with Liberians in college, but I see where you're coming from. So it is a thing of, I can sit over here and I can say all these things, never having experience living in Monrovia, which is the capital of Liberia, or I can say all these things, never have lived in Bosnia. So yeah, I too agree. I'm not a spiritual person, but I think of blessings as maybe it was the way, maybe it is written that way within the universe. So Christians would say it's God, or God has already written your story, or if you're believe in esoteric stuff, you believe in the Akashic records. I tend to believe, get ready to kick me off the panel for saying this, but I tend to believe that we are in some sort of a computer simulation, and I believe that there's some sort of programmers who have written certain people to be certain things. So I do agree and understand what you're talking about, and I'm glad I'm glad you brought it to a scientific perspective when you were talking about a test group and a non-test group, and are we, and me specifically, am I the result of a certain test?
Right, because
I get what you're talking about.
No, you got it. Because the thing is,
yeah.
I may have emotional connections to a particular idea, but this is what I do for myself to gain wisdom. So my thing is, because remember, chef, this is just a chef analogy or metaphor, right?
Yeah.
If I'm going to test which is better, I cook a steak on the stove and then I cook a steak on the grill. What I'm going to do, one, is make sure that I use a steak that it's the same cut of steak. If it's going to be sirloin, if it's going to be ribeye, it's going to be, both of them are going to be ribeye. Yeah. They're actually going to be from the same cow, and they're actually going to be cut from the same side of beef, preferably the two ribeyes that are closest to each other, so that there are less variables, right? I'm what's called the Six Sigma black belt in corporate America, if you understand that. Mm-hmm. Six Sigma involves eliminating, when in manufacturing, eliminating the most, that's the smallest point of variation that you want in manufacturing, so everything's the same. So now, in terms of the test group, what we do, same cow, same side of beef, closest ribeyes next to each other. What's going to take place? Then it's going to be the same amount of salt, pepper, garlic powder. That's going to be on both of them, right? We went through all of that. Why? Because we have to keep, in order for the results to come through, they can't be from the fruit of the poison tree, which means that we have to eliminate all of the variables that would make it different, right? So now, perfect example. What state were you born in?
I'm from the great state of Ohio.
Okay. Great state of Ohio.
Yeah.
I was born in the great state of New York. All right. One of us was born in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Somebody else was, I don't know if she was born there, but resided in the state of Oregon. Okay. Another one resided in the state of Louisiana. Each of the nature and nurture variables that would have impacted us, those will play a major part. I'm going to say one piece because we got another show to do, right? I'm going to say one piece, and I'm going to say this. There was a guy that worked for me. He was a Caucasian dude. He was my dude. He's from Boston. He lived in Georgia, right? In a very urban office building where there was only maybe 20 white people out of about 675. He wanted to understand how to gain the folks' respect. I had to explain, yo, bro, you grew up in Boston. I grew up in New York. We were in the Northeast. That was where the Underground Railroad ended. That was the promised land. There's a lot of people that did not make it to the promised land. There's people that are surrounding you. I said, you grew up around white guys that might have dated black girls and vice versa. Where we are right now, the people, anybody who works with you who's over 30 might have had a grandmother that was a slave or a victim of Jim Crow. That changes the dynamic of variables that impact you. So for you, Chaotic Truth, and in myself, we're Northern guys. So there's certain things that don't even come through our purview. But when you could look and say your great grandmother was a slave, it changes the dynamic of what you see is impacting, because you are somewhat indirectly or directly impacted. So I said all of that to say, when you look at this clinically, I'm just sharing with you my medicine pills with you. You may want to try and eliminate your own personal variables from the equation so that you may come to a more clinically astute result. You feel me?
Can I say something?
I definitely do.
Can I say something, Chaotic? Is that okay? Or did you?
It's
No,
your show. Yeah.
I thought you was going to respond. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, to two things that was said. First of all, Chaotic, you're always welcome here. And the whole idea as far as the matrix piece, trust. I mean, well, simulation. You're not alone, right? I tell people all the time, right? I'd be like, okay, someone seemed like they just dropped a program in just now, and it spreads like a virus because you go to everyone's channels or platforms and it's the same talking points. And then next week it shifts to something else. And then everyone is talking about the same thing. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, is this the Matrix? Like, what is happening? So you're not alone. So you don't have to feel like you're crazy saying it in this space. And the second thing I wanted to say is that it's not always about opportunity. Sometimes it's about the access to the opportunity. And what do I mean when I say that? I used to volunteer with the Literacy Council, right? And I used to teach a 41-year-old Black male how to read. He was reading on a first grade level at 41 years old, okay? Now, for you, you might look at him and say, how could that happen? You know, you might look at him and say, he's a failure, whatever, right? This is the land of plenty, right? Plenty of opportunities. How could he not be able to read or be only reading on the first grade level at 41? And this is the thing, like Chef was just speaking, people have their own individual experiences. and we tend to like really not factor that in. This is someone that had a lot of trauma in his life, right? And so what happens oftentimes with children when they are traumatized, let's say school is not a priority. It's just not. Education is not a priority. When your mom is not in the house because she's on crack and you have to figure out how your siblings are going to eat, school is not a priority. Getting up in the morning to make it to school is not a priority, right? So sometimes it's not just about, yes, we're in the land of opportunity, but it's about access. And it's about the things that interrupt your access to those things. And a lot of people have those traumatic family histories that's kind of getting in the way of them going after their goals like you did, okay? Or getting up and saying, I'm going to start this business, right? Because perhaps they haven't unpacked those issues. And I'm not talking about slavery. You went as far as talking about Liberia. You don't have to go that far. You really don't. Right here in America, that is happening. It's happening right here in America where people just don't have access for a number of different reasons. And it's not just simply because they are lazy. That is not true. People are dealing with some real issues and it's getting in the way of them going after their best self. But what happens to some of us who were able to acquire certain things, we can't even begin to think or even to consider that there's this 41-year-old person that cannot read. They can only read in the first grade level. Now you tell me, how far do you think he's getting? He's a functioning illiterate. And the illiteracy rate in the area that I am in is very, very high. And again, I tell people all the time, literacy is not just about pronouncing words and being able to read. You have to be able to comprehend as well. That's a part of literacy. So I wanted to speak to that because I saw that you know, oftentimes when we try to think of like situations that we might be blessed not to be in, we tend to go outside of the country. But there are people right here, Baltimore, that's dealing with some serious trauma, right? Incest in their families. And you're going to tell me that the first thing on their mind is to what? Is to get a good government paying job? No, survival is what comes first. I can come to you and I can talk to you. And if you're hungry, you won't hear me until I feed you. Right? This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? That's really what we're talking about. And it doesn't have to be outside the country. It's happening right here. So I wanted to speak to that because oftentimes when we try to think of like gruesome situations or just like, you know, unfortunate things, we think we got to go outside of America. And there are people who are living nightmares right here in America. And so to just simply say that's on them because the land of opportunity, I really think it's really showing our disconnect to that part of the population, right? Or to that demographic. And when we talk in these conversations, we're often talking to people who are in, like my ad said, who are on the same consciousness as us. And I'm like, that's really not who needs to hear the message. The people that need to see your example are the people I'm speaking about. Not majority of the circles that you're probably running in on YouTube. So I just wanted to speak to that. Like, we don't have to go all the way to Liberia, sir. We could go right here. I live in Maryland. We could go right in Baltimore. We can start there. And many, many other inner cities across the United States of America. So I just wanted to speak to that. But I know that we're going to be wrapping up. Chaotic, if you have any last things to say before you leave us, please do so we can move on.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you guys for allowing me to come up on the panel. I definitely enjoyed it. Thank you, Chef. I saw the private chat. And I also wanted to ask you about supply chain and your thoughts on that as well. But I definitely will find your channel. I'm assuming Chef has a channel, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's gonna go live. He goes live after this one.
Okay, so yeah, I'll look for that. But thank you guys, and I definitely again, I respect everybody's positions. And I want to give this disclaimer. I don't necessarily believe everything that I'm saying. I'm just asking questions. But you guys have a good one. Peace.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for coming. Peace.
Maricela and Maat, any last words? Because I know we want to wrap up so that we can transition over to Chef. And go ahead, Maricela, Maat, any last words? Hi, King.
Hey, what's up? I was hoping that because the numbers are going back up, I was hoping I could go extra a few minutes. But if y'all
Oh,
want
sure.
to, no, it's not. It's not for me to say. It's for you and Chef for them to agree upon. Because I see the numbers going up to 50.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I care about analytics. So the
Yeah.
numbers are going up now. So if you want to continue on, you should continue on. I don't know what the hell Chaotic Truth was saying, but I like him because I am Neo for the Matrix. I really am. So y'all just
Yeah, Maricela and Maat, I mean, if you guys have anything, maybe something you heard that was just said by Chef or Chaotic, please speak on it at this time. If not, we can continue on with the
right
conversation.
because it helps everybody. When the numbers go up and then it makes the transition to Chef page, he's dealing with more people.
Thank you.
Right.
It all makes sense when everybody's winning, right? But if y'all want to cut it short, it should go to at least 11:30, 11:45. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
King. Maat, Maricela.
No, I'm I'm a little lost. I'm not gonna even lie. That was an interesting add to the conversation. Mayat, do you have anything?
Let me. So I think that go. What did you say, Hanifa?
No. I was gonna say I had a few things, but go ahead, Maat. Go ahead.
No, I was just kind of thinking about what you were saying, because that was kind of my first thought. Because my thought, well, one of my thoughts when he was speaking, and he went to Liberia, and thinking about the things that we see every day in our country. And I did like what, Chef was saying, because a lot of times we don't necessarily see our own experience as being any better than someone else's. And so then we kind of tend to, well, I'm not going to say we, because I don't necessarily do this, but some people in our communities that have achieved a certain level tend to, talk about that, pull your boots up by your bootstrap kind of concept. And we have to kind of understand how to, get everyone is not, we've talked about this before, everybody comes into the room at different levels. And everybody, even when a traumatic situation happens, we're all experiencing it in different ways. So a lot of times we are getting, so the trauma that has happened, and even epigenetics is one thing, but then we're constantly experiencing trauma every day. And that is, anytime we see someone get shot, and even when we see other cultures, and specifically white people, not getting justice served, that is still a traumatic situation for us, and it does something to our psyche. And so I think we're in situations where we are in, like Chef said, kind of blessed or privileged, and we all have different experiences, because in some senses you can say, well, women are privileged in this area, but then you can say in other areas men are privileged in another area. So we have to understand that everything is about our own personal experiences, and we look at it through those lens. And in order to kind of build on a community level, we have to address everyone experience that is in the collective. So we do first look at self, but then we have to kind of spread it out, because even if I'm experiencing trauma as a mother, it's going to be different how my daughter experiences trauma, how my son experiences trauma. It's just like something happened to my son when he was I don't know, he was a few months old, and he's not going to remember that, right? But I still kind of traumatized by it. And it wasn't anything crazy, but it was something that was trauma to me. So it's it's something that we have to understand, that we are looking at it through our own personal lens, and we have to understand how to get that, how to address the trauma in our own lives and address the trauma in someone else's, and help everyone kind of get to a certain level or to a certain frequency in order for us um to kind of work together and to move together. And I know that's not everyone's goal. Everyone's goal is not necessarily to work together. You know, that might not be our goal, but that's why you always, we have those concepts of your vibe attracts your tribe, because there are people who are wanting to do certain things in your community, and we have to address everyone. In essence, we have to address everyone in the room.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for that, my aunt. Hi, Michael. Can you hear us? You're on
You're
mute.
on mute.
You're on mute, sir.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Okay.
Welcome. Welcome
Great,
to
great.
Conversation
Thank you,
with
thank you,
Me.
thank you all for having me.
What do you have for us? What do you have to contribute to this conversation?
Yeah, it's I wanted to go back to, I guess, a question that you asked. I believe because the topic is what, I guess, toxic traits have been passed down. Is that correct? Okay. And then or not a question, you said a statement you made about too chaotic about access. I wanted to speak on that because I heard everything that they got said, and it was very laughable. But to do that, I wanted to, or I say that because I wanted to be like, okay, great. Well, I could contribute to the conversation in this way by saying, me as you know, a melanated man in America, I have created access, like you said, for my children. And I'm the first one in my, not only in my immediate family, because I have 3 older siblings, 2 brothers and 1 sister, and then, you know, all of my other siblings. And I'm the first one, the only one that I know of that has created, like you said, access through the intentions of my parents seeing the gift in me in order to create like access for an avenue to, for be like, oh, okay, well, hey, my son likes drums. I can, you know, I've been doing this for a certain number of years. I can create access to where when you get a certain age, I can put you where to, hey, I'm not going to be here. You need to learn this music. You need to do what these people tell you to. And when I come pick you up, I need to hear a good report, you know, but all of that takes intentionality. And like you said, access, because my parents are still together. I'm pretty sure Chaotic's parents were still together. And it's hilarious to me. At the same time, it just confirms what I already know, that like you said, man, it's funny, people come on here with suits and jackets and stuff, man, and be like, hey, you can do it too, you know, and they don't take into consideration about, like you said, because I live in Alabama, the northern part of Alabama, right? And like you said, you don't have to go all the way to Liberia, because I used to be a part of an African People's Socialist Party, and they're like the true revolutionaries. And they think about not only African people like here, but literally around the world. And I remember when I was really heavy in that party, a guy told me, he was like, bruh, I know, I get what you're saying, but there's people in Selma right now that don't have plumbing. So what are we going to do about that on top of, you know, Africa as a whole? So like you said, man, it's real disingenuous. And then it takes intentionality, because, yeah, I'm a musician. I hang with everyone. I play drums at a 7-day Adventist Black church, 2 Sunday Black churches, and I play at a Presbyterian church. So I know how to deal with white people. I'll put on gigs at big prominent venues in the city that are owned by white people, and then I can go down to the juke joint and I can be cool with the owners, and I can understand that just because that they don't have the business mindset and or the budget to, you know, do the things that I want. I understand the market, and I have the wherewithal to where I can teach people that, hey, you can do this too, instead of being like, hey, you can do it, but just you do it yourself because we got access to it. But no, you kind of don't, unless you have, like you said, we're in the simulation or whatever, unless whatever programmer took those things, like Chef was saying, the ingredients that would make the steak different, even though it was cut from the same loin. So it's like you said, it's super disingenuous, and it's laughable to hear people have that mindset. But it just shows you how rigorous colonialism is, because a lot of people don't like to talk about it, because that's the reason why all of these relationships and the women are out of order and stuff. Because like 500 years ago we weren't, 1,000 years ago we weren't. When Mansa Musa was alive, we weren't. So it's like you said, it's real disingenuous, and that's all I had to say.
Yeah, and that's, and and Chaotic has a right to his perspective, and most of the times, most of the times, what I was speaking to with him is that oftentimes we speak as far as our eyes can go, right? And oftentimes, a lot of times, it's because we are not exposed to other environments and circumstances and so forth. And the reason why is, when people start to do well in life, they tend to be around other people who are also, so that there's a disconnect that can easily happen. It can happen to any of us. And so that's why I wanted to just point out to him that you don't have to go all the way over to Liberia. But I thank you for your perspective, because you mentioned, as far as you creating an avenue to where your children can have access, right? And I don't know if that was done for you as well, or you're the one it sounded like you're the one that's just starting to do that.
But see, the catalyst is, and and I'm in therapy and stuff, and I've just realized this. Like, I guess I'll give a quick example before I answer the question directly. I used to get really angry at my father when he would ask for discounts, and I knew he had the money, because I know he has a good job, and I know he's like a high ranking guy and works hard or whatever. But then, me being in this position as a musician, I just came from Perry, Georgia, playing for a week at the Georgia National Fair, and I asked for anything I could free because I knew what he did, and then I knew what the privilege that I have now. And so the thing is, I wouldn't have that if he didn't instill that in me. He saw in me that I could play drums, and he knew what to do with that at an early age. Like, before I started playing drums, my dad, what did he do? He brought home a bootleg version of the first drum line when I was 10, 11 years old, on a Saturday morning. The next week, I got a pair of sticks, a practice pad, and some lessons. And it's just been ever since.
Yeah, and that matters. It matters. That's what I said when my aunt and Maricela was, I don't know if you were listening in that early on, but I was telling them that it matters. We were talking about the music, and Maricela was saying that she don't know, because she have, family members that has done well for themselves despite the type of music that they listen to. And so I was telling her that, I think the family structure matters in these situations, right? I know people, for example, who grew up in the hood, but they had their mother and father in the home, right? And there was a certain structure there, so they didn't get caught up in the streets. That's real. Okay, that's real. And they still grew up in the same hood with all of their other friends who may have taken a different path. I think the family structure being in place matters tremendously. I think our breakdown in our nuclear family is what plays is really what's causing a lot of the issues that, and then you have to get into why that is, right? Why is our nuclear families so chaotic and almost non-existent right now? So we can get into all of that without anyone what do you call it, derailing the conversation, or saying that, oh, this is victim Olympics, because everything is connected. And we have to really be aware of that. And so in talking about everything being connected, that brings us back, because I know we're gonna be wrapping up soon, that brings us back to the topic at hand, which was traits that was passed down. We started off with toxic. What I'm asking now, and even in the comment section, if you guys are in the chat, put some things that you inherited, that you just listed one, Michael, with your father, in understanding why he was penny pinching maybe.
Right.
But like let's talk about some of those things. I know for me, you know, I grew up with a single mom. It was 5 of us in the home, and like I said, I am the youngest of 5 girls. There are some levels of independence that I got from my mother that I appreciate to this day. Right? I always say my seeds will never lack, nor will they ever go hungry. Right? That's also because of things that I've inherited from the people around me, from my aunts, from my you know, my mom, and so forth. So my ability to not get so emotional in situations and be able to step back and say, okay, what's really happening here? I think that comes from my mom as well, you know, and actually it has helped me as an adult, right? So when I see, this is why I could speak to when I see a woman that decides that she's going to pop off in the grocery store, right? And you can't walk away. For me, I'm just like, you could have easily de-escalated that and just walk away. That's me being in control of my own emotions. Now, over time, I had to fine tune that. I tell people I am an Aries sun, I guess, right? And I have a lot of fire, right? I tend to be the friend who everyone comes to for encouragement and upliftment. But I have a lot of fire, which means that, listen, you're going to either be guided by this fire, you're going to either be warmed by it, or you're going to get lit up. Okay? Now, the lit up piece is what I have come to be able to control over time. Okay? That's another thing that I wouldn't say was given to me. I think I built on it. Not to get so emotionally, you know, the nonchalantness that Caribbean people tend to have oftentimes. That has helped me tremendously in my life as well. The strength of my ancestors is not, it's not something that I am willing to trade in, right? It helped them and it helps me even now. It helps me my parenting, it helps me my relationships, right? It helps me my friendships, and it helps me my community. So it's not something that I'm willing to relinquish as far as like being resilient. Be resilient. Everyone does not have that ability, right? Some people just collapse under pressure. Like the first weight that's laid on them, they collapse. I think I'm honored, right, to have inherited that level of resilience from my ancestors. I really am honored to have inherited that. And I'm trying to think of some others. But my aunt and Maricela, you guys could jump in at any time since we're talking about like and you, Michael, you're up here with us, so feel free to jump in at any time. But anything that you guys can think of that you look at that was good, you know, that you inherited from your ancestors or your mom or grandmother.
I think that in my family, something that I, just seeing growing up was, the connection. And I think as in our culture, we have a strong connection to to our spiritual systems. Now, and I, even though I'm not in the same spiritual system that I grew up with, I always tell people that I appreciate that. I appreciate where I come from and where I am now, because the way that I researched and learning how to research led me to where I am now, and that deepening of my spiritual system, like, and deepening of spirituality. So I think our connection that we do have in our culture is something that we can appreciate. We do need to kind of take out some of the elements that we no longer need, but understanding that that came from something that we were already connected. We were already connected, and there's a reason why we are connected. There's a reason why those vibrations and those frequencies. I mean, even if you still, like, I don't necessarily still listen to a lot of gospel music, but when you listen to it, or you listen to a choir, you listen to a gospel song, you can kind of feel those frequencies and those vibrations, and they have a different they have a different they kind of do something to you. And so, you know, I appreciate all of those experiences in how they connected me and helped me from where I was in the moment. And then it also helped me from where I am now and where I'm going, because I am a person that always says that I'm becoming a better version of myself. I'm always becoming, you know. So you know, that's one thing that I appreciate, is knowing that I'm becoming, you know, and until my last day on this plane, I am becoming. So that's something that I think is something that we have that connection to something that is greater than ourselves.
Yeah, I totally get that. Maricela, you have something?
Yeah, for me, and it goes kind of back to what Chaotic was mentioning about being a worker and things of that nature. Um, in culturally, a lot of people from Latino descent have been gatherers, whether it's gatherers of fruit, of whatever. Um, for me, I'm a gatherer of information, and at times I didn't see my patients as because in my family they're so patient, sometimes it drives me crazy, but I see that in myself. But with that patience to gather information, I've been able to go back into my community and talk to commissioners about changes that we need to make, about at this point in time doing policy change, and not just only for the Latino community, but also to spread it out to Black and white community, providing health literacy materials and workshops against racism, equity, and inclusion. And I think somebody had said once that my voice is really soft, which is fine. But I think because my voice is soft, and because I come from people that talk calmly, that sound a little bit nervous, because I know sometimes I come off a little bit nervous, but that have good intention, um, it's played in my favor to let people see where I'm coming from. And that's something I got from my family is, you know, make sure I always say, make sure your tone of voice matches your intention. Um, so that would be the one trait that I'm really grateful for having, is patience, and making sure that I'm just really paying attention to the information that I have. Sometimes I've dropped the ball, and I'll be accountable for that. But for the most part, um, that's been the trait where, it's, as much as it does drive me crazy at times, it's been a saving grace.
Michael, can you give us one before we wrap up? Because I also want to give Chef time to come in and do his little garden rock spiel. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Because it was what positive traits you're passing down.
Yes, you're right.
Mm, well, okay. I am in. So I guess whatever trait would it be, right? To I guess sum it up would be to seek help first. And what that would mean, what that would look like. I'm in my second marriage, and I have a marriage counselor and I have a therapist. So, and I got them before shit, went left. Luckily, nothing has went left, or anything like that. So that's what I want to definitely instill in my children, especially since, like I said, I'm in a marriage, so we're in a blended family, and I have three of my own that I'm brought into, and I have one on the way, right? And she has two of her own. And I always want to instill to them, and I know my older brother is as well, to his children, to, hey, talk it out, talk to us, talk to somebody, you know what I'm saying? But please, just don't hold it in, and I hate to say it, like, your mom's side of the family, because like that's just what it is. That's so that they don't talk to people. Hell, I have people in my family that don't talk to people, but luckily, some of us are being intentional enough to be like, hey, this is what it looks like not to talk to people, and this is what it looks like to do it. And then I guess whatever path you choose is on you, but like we've shown you the way, and I believe that is a great trait that I am passing on to not only my children but to myself on a daily, weekly basis.
Thank you for that, Michael. So we're gonna go ahead and start wrapping up.
Yes, ma'am.
But I just wanted to just say that to the conversation, to the topic, talking about generational traits that we have passed down, or have been passed down to us, and then we in turn probably have already began, if we have children, and I think everyone on the panel right now does, began to pass down to our children. One of the things that I would encourage anyone that's listening to do is to first, identify it, right? It's oftentimes where we're utilizing certain tools. It's almost like an automatic thing. We're just doing it. We're not really paying attention to it. And it's something that we are not comfortable with, or we realize it's not working, because let's be honest, there's a lot of different things that our parents may have done with us that just doesn't work in this generation, and that's just real, right? But being able to identify those things and say, okay, where did this come from? Where did I inherit this from? And most of the time, because we're always so busy, right? And there are so many distractions, so many things pulling on us all the time, we really don't get the time to sit and to really like pay attention to what's not just going out, but also what's coming in, right? And also what's already living in there. So for me, I would say if there are things that you are starting to see certain patterns in your life, some of it might be too overwhelming, and so you might need help unpacking it, right? So you might be able to talk to maybe someone who's further along in their journey. That's one, because I know we often jump to therapy, and I had to really think about this the other day. Like, everyone does not have access to therapy. Everyone cannot afford therapy. Like, that's just a real thing. Okay. And so maybe just talking to the people around you who you see are doing the things that you want to do, right? Or maybe are doing it better. If you're like, I want to stop hitting, I'm going to use my example. I want to stop spanking my child because I realize that it's doing more detriment than good. And I am not getting the outcomes that I'm hoping for, right? Find people. There are books out there. There are people out there who are not hitting their children. Maybe those are the people you need to reach out to. Everything doesn't have to be you lying on somebody's couch in a therapy session, right? Or under hypnosis, right? Some people just don't have access and they can't afford it. But you do have access to people who are already demonstrating those things, who already have the results, who are already doing it. Those are the people you might want to connect to. And let me just be clear. I said earlier, oftentimes when our trauma becomes our identity, we can all, healing can make us feel like we're losing ourselves. Let me just be clear. When you begin to break certain family patterns, there is a possibility that you are also going to be breaking some family relationships. That's real. That's real, because a lot of people are trauma bonding. I don't know if Chef want to put that in the chat as to what that means, but a lot of people are trauma bonding even in our families. Most of us don't want to go in a different direction because we don't want to be separated from the family unit, or we don't want to feel isolated, or we don't want to step out there on our own. But I can promise you that there's a community of people on your journey. You are always going to find other people who are on the same journey. So don't be afraid to step out of what the comfort zone is in your family. If it's something that you're like, not my children, and you could start speaking that over your family unit. That's the other thing. We talk about generational curses as if they are a death sentence. There is power of life and death in the tongue, right? The tongue is a creative tool. Words are energy. We have the potential. We have actually the power. That's the word I'm looking for. We have the power to begin to change certain dynamics. We have the power to shift certain paradigms that we see in our families. So I don't want to minimize the power of the spoken word, the power of speaking certain things over your family. So if there's something you're identifying in your family that you're like, I refuse to pass this down, then you are actually going to have to change the way you speak to your children about who they are. If you come from a family where they call the children bitches, okay, where they call the children stupid, right? Where they're colorist because maybe you were the darker child or your sibling was the lighter child and there was favoritism, and you don't want to pass that on to your children, then you're going to have to start talking to your children, whether they're lighter or darker, about how beautiful they are. You're going to have to start talking to them about how intelligent they are. You are going to have to start talking to them about the things that they can do, that nothing is impossible if you put your mind to it. What is it that you want to do? And you're going to have to feed that to them, because in feeding that to them, you are also undoing it in yourself. So don't be afraid to disconnect from those family members that is going to keep you stuck and only end up passing on the same thing that you are trying to get rid of. Getting rid of it may mean getting rid of your mama. Yes, I said it. Yes, I said it. Because we know in the Black communities, mothers are infallible. They are held to a certain, and I know why, right? Because that's who's doing the feeding, and so we're not going to get into that. But if your mama is toxic, she's toxic. And unless you want that toxicity to be passed down to your children, you are going to have to break that off. That's it. I tell people all the time, you have to learn to feed people without inviting them to your table. Make a takeout dish for them and send them about their way. Everyone does not get to sit at your table and eat. So I say that when I say that, I mean, we have these loyalties to family. We can actually still love, respect them, and everything else, but not allow them to get their sut on our children if we are intentional about breaking certain generational patterns. We're going to have to get serious about this. You might have to build a thing of protection around your children, because the same mother that is toxic to you, more than likely your children get around them and they start saying some little things. I know we all have experienced this, where you be like, don't do that. Don't say that to my child, right? Don't do that. That's not how we talk to each other in my family. And that's what I mean. Don't be afraid to cut those ties. If you are serious about not passing on something, then be serious about it. Some of it is going to require you to go in like a surgeon and start as like a surgeon and start cutting, right? Cutting out some of those infections and those things that are creating sickness in your family unit. So I just wanted to add that in, since we're talking about passing down things. They are going to, most of the things that are given to us that are not good, they come from our mothers, they come from our fathers, they come from those who are closest to us. Don't be afraid to break away. No one is saying that you have to not open your door for them when they come and knock. All I'm saying is stop thinking that you have to entertain everyone at your table. Some people are good with a doggy bag. Give it to them and let them go if it means protecting your family. That's what I wanted to say.
That was awesome, Hanifa.
Thank you, Hanifa. I want to say that was amazing, and I want to definitely say there's power in words. I said I was going to get 1,000 in a month. I got it in 5 weeks. There's power in words. I felt the monetization for my page in 5 weeks. There's power in words. Eliminate yourself, eliminate all the negativity around you. There's truly power in words. I'm going to get 10,000 right by my birthday, March 17th. There's power in words. I said I'm going to get it in a month. Lenski, Loverboy Lenski, this is my word. Loverboy Lenski said you're going to get it November 15th. And I got it on November 15th. This is my word. I got 1,000 subscribers on November 15th because Lenski said it. There's power in words. So please take what President Hanifa says, and take it with you, because that is really the truth. There's really power. He really said that, and I have it. He said it, and I want to say that's something that we really got to take with us. Stopping generational curses, or what my Hanifa would say, which is patterns. We stop it by making sure we're not around it with our mind, our body, our soul, and our verbiage. So with that being said, I'm going to let Chef do what he do. If everybody finish. So I'm going to let Chef does what he do. And Chef, can you come up? Can somebody bring Chef up, please?
I just want to say thank you to Michael. I know he left, but thanks to Michael again for contributing to the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Chef, are
And
you
can
there?
I just want to add one thing,
Absolutely.
that with identifying those people, also identify those toxic habits that we've normalized, and really think about one thing. I tell my kids this: is it helping you or is it hurting you?
Yes.
So if you're doing something, absorbing something, eating something, drinking something, whatever it is, you have to ask yourself, is it helping you or is it hurting you? And that's just my last thing that I want to say. Chef, it's on.
Hey, it's on me. All right, so we didn't get the monologue going. Can you guys hear me clearly? We didn't get the monologue going early on in the show, so I'm going to give y'all a monologue, and then I'm going to give you a lead-in topic to the next show. First things first, thank you, each and every single one of you, for taking your place within this wonderful place. This place exists within a universe called our sphere. Why? Because we are not manosphere, we are not black manosphere. We exist within a total different sphere that is based on truth and understanding. Within our sphere, there's a place called the True Pill Community Garden. Why? Because we are not red pill, we are not blue pill, and we do not assign or subscribe to any of those variables of red or blue pill rage. Why? Because we are the True Pill community. And this is a garden. And within this garden, there's two pivotal characters, two pivotal forces within the garden. One are the flowers, and the other are the rocks. The flowers are our women, the rocks are the men. Why the flowers? Well, the flowers are the quintessential life bringers within this universe of ours. They create life everywhere they go, and life comes forth from them. And how do they do it? Well, they take the light from the sun, and they actually transfer it and change it and create oxygen, which is necessary for all of us mammals, all of us beings to breathe, including the fish who get the oxygen out of the water, believe it or not. So they are pivotal. The birds, the bees, they take the seeds, not just the ones dropped onto the floor, but they take them to other parts of the world and other gardens in order to sow life. So what makes them beautiful? What's so special about them? They breathe that life and create oxygen for us. And us as life forms, we breathe that oxygen in. And as we breathe that oxygen in, what do we say? I mean, what do we do? Well, we expend energy, expel carbon dioxide, and breathe it back out. And what do? They take it and turn that baby right back into oxygen to breathe life back into us. Thus, metaphorically, meaning they take our waste and still come and give us life after that. It's a beautiful thing. The reciprocity of this garden is amazing. And reciprocally, us as the rocks have a really important job. And what do? We sit on the outer perimeter, outer periphery of the garden to protect those flowers from any people that potentially may harm the garden or step on them. Why? Because before you even have an opportunity to step on one of our precious flowers, you would have to succumb to the pain of sharp stone beneath your feet. So, what does that mean? That means that we protect our garden vigilantly. And then there's some other kinds of flowers, but we don't always call them flowers. We call them weeds. Weeds normally come in posed as flowers to potentially choke out the life of our precious life bringers. So we look at them as the same as intruding feet. So for the record, when you enter the garden, please enter in peace and take your rightful place within the garden. But please also understand that any undue, negative, or nefarious incursions into our garden would be met with swift justice. Last thing. Last thing. Chaotic sparked a question that I wanted you guys to take into the next episode that I'm about to start up and unpack. I'm going to ask you guys a question. Listen to the question. We're going to run it during the show. Man 1 falls into 2 separate holes on the street that he's walking down twice in the same day. That's man 1. Man 2 walks down the same street totally unscathed for a whole week. Who is smarter? Man 1 or man 2? Just rock with me. It seems confusing, but we're going to unpack that. So I appreciate you guys. Chef Choupino, CHEF space CHOUPINO, and we're about to get it popping. Let's go.
Peace, everyone.
Peace, everyone.